It was not pretty the first few days, I have to say. I guess there's no way to avoid getting too graphic, but there was scabs and blood involved. There was a lot of crying from both me and my son. It was tough, and nobody told me that it wasn't something that was just going to click naturally for everyone. And I think that was really scary to me.
Balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
Episode number 65. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, the place where the girls hang out. I am your host, Lori Jill Eisenstadt, IBCLC, and I want to thank you so much for spending your time with me today. My regular listeners hear my guests say all the time how surprised they were to learn that this natural thing called breastfeeding did not necessarily come naturally to them. It took moms a while until they felt comfortable and confident with breastfeeding. I know this certainly was true for me. When I thought about what would have helped me in the early days of breastfeeding, I just know that being connected to an IBCLC and asking all my burning questions would have been of tremendous value to me. Please check out allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/Skype, where you can learn detailed information on what I have to offer you in the way of a Skype consult, an individual private session just for you. A time set aside just so you could ask all of your burning questions before your baby's born. My regular listeners also are quite familiar with my favorite mother's organization, Momentum. Melanie is my guest today, and she's a member of Momentum. You are going to learn a lot about the early days of her breastfeeding with her newborn son, the struggles she went through and what she did to power through hard times, and how great she felt when breastfeeding began going a lot smoother for her and how happy this made her. No need to wait another second. Let's get started. Welcome to All About Breastfeeding, the place where the girls hang out. Today I would like to introduce Melanie. She is married, a stay-at-home mom to 3 children under the age of 8. When she is not pouring juice or correcting homework, she works as a contract recruiter in the fashion industry. Melanie is active in the community as a foster and adoptive parent and also facilitates discussion groups through the Mother Center of Southwest Nassau on Long Island. Welcome, Melanie, to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm grateful to share my experience.
I am too, and I was born in Brooklyn, and my parents moved their kids out to Massapequa, so I grew up in Massapequa. I'm now living in Arizona, but my heart is definitely back in New York, and I'm from Massapequa, Long Island.
Strong Island.
Yes. Although people here, when they make fun of me, they do it really weird. They go Long Island.
That's pretty accurate.
So how are you today?
I'm doing well. Everybody's napping, so this is mommy time now.
Oh, good. Well, you know what? I'm thrilled that you're deciding to spend that precious mommy time with me.
Absolutely. It's well worth it to share information.
I've done several shows already on with other members from Momentum, and I have a promo going about Momentum, and we're going to talk a bit more about that. It probably will infiltrate throughout the conversation, and that's fine. I wanted to start off by you sharing a little bit about what life was like for you in the family that you grew up in.
Yeah, I was the oldest of 4 children, and I grew up probably the first quarter of my life in Queens, New York, suburb of New York City. And then we moved out to Long Island, but I had a younger sister and 2 younger brothers. despite growing up in a lower middle class family, I feel like we really had an idyllic childhood. My parents were very creative and always encouraged creativity and imagination. And I'd like to say that we all had a good time.
So you're the oldest of 4.
Yes.
Do you fit that typical older child profile?
Absolutely. Bossy, controlling. You can just ask my siblings. I think that they would still say I'm always the one in charge.
Yeah, it's funny. It's when a little while ago I was watching some news outtake of, now I'm going to forget the name of the family, but I think they had like six or 8 kids. I think it's in the Coffee family. And they were interviewing them. And so the interviewer said, now which one is the joker? And like all the other 6 or 8 kids point to the exact person. Which is the more studious one? Which is the more bossy one? And they definitely got everybody's number right. And everybody knew who everybody was which label, so it was funny.
Yes, everybody kind of falls into their role. We've done groups about that through Momentum, our discussion groups, talking about birth order. And it's funny how it's very pervasive.
I know. And the thing is, when there's a sibling who doesn't necessarily like that title, they don't want to own it. But you have all the other siblings pointing to them and saying, oh, yes, you are.
Absolutely. You are what you are.
You are what you are. So I would love for you to share a little bit about when you were a little girl, what was it that you thought that you would be doing as an adult, and is that anything like what you're doing now?
Wow. I think I thought I was going to be a famous actress/doctor. I guess I do a little bit of both in my life, though it's not my vocation. I think cleaning up boo-boos and administering Band-Aids kind of falls under the doctor heading. And as far as the actress part, entertaining children, you've got to be a world-class actress.
Very early in my Mother Center Momentum life, when I attended a workshop with women who were thinking about going back into the workforce after staying home for 3 to 5 years with their children, and were feeling a huge lack of confidence. I'm just staying home, cleaning spit up and wiping boo-boos. And, what can I really do? And so this workshop was like 45 minutes of this really wonderful person just pounding into us. What do you mean? What can you do? You're a doctor. You're a nurse. You're a psychiatrist. You're a teacher. You're a crafts person. You're just started name. You're a bookkeeper. You're an accountant. You're a car mechanic. You're a house cleaner. Just really left me thinking what are we thinking that we can't do anything? Look at all the things we are doing, and we're doing a lot of them all in the same day.
That's right. Moms are a jack of all trades.
We are. So what are you currently doing?
Right now, I am a part-time contract recruiter. I work in the fashion industry specifically, so hiring designers, merchandisers, even accountants, something I never thought that I would do. And had I known I could get paid to talk to people on the phone all day and offer them jobs, I probably would have saved myself about $60,000 in student loans and not gone to college.
Oh, yeah.
But hindsight is 20/20. It's been a great job for me because it's become something that can be flexible, and I can work from home and be there for my kids as needed, because as you know, people have doctor's appointments, after school activities, and it's tough to find the time to do it all.
Yeah. What you said was very interesting in that we grew up, our parents' generation and my generation, and probably even your generation grew up thinking that you had to have a fancy degree to do any job, right?
Sure.
And you learn after a while that sometimes you don't have to have that college degree to do some of the work that we're now doing.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm seeing now, especially in the 21st century, scary that I'm even saying 21st century, I have flying cars yet, and I don't understand how that's possible. But now it's just expected that you're going to have some kind of degree in higher education, whereas all of the executives I work with didn't necessarily go to college. And it was just a matter of you got a job in the mailroom wherever you wanted to work, and you worked your way up from there. And now it's kind of one of these things, before you can even get an entry-level job, you have to have some kind of degree. So it's a very different world now.
It is a very different world, and sometimes it is hard because you do get that degree, you spend a lot of money, and then sometimes you get out and you get this entry-level job that until you work your way up the ladder, it's hard paying back that student loan.
It's true. And if you expect then to be a mom at some point and perhaps leave the workforce for a little bit, your earnings capability, is going to be limited. Unfortunately, a sad reality right now, but hopefully we'll get some people in the office in November who will work to change that.
We've definitely gotten better over the years, but it's still, in my mind, far from perfect.
Yes.
I'd like to, if you will, just work with me for a minute, and I just want to walk you through a very mini meditation.
Okay.
And so I just want to close our eyes and just do a little breathing before we get into talking about breastfeeding stuff. Are you okay with that?
Sure.
All right, so just sit upright in your chair, put your feet flat on the floor, and kind of relax your shoulders and close your eyes and just take a nice deep breath in through your nose. And slowly let the air out through a little pinhole through your lips. Take another deep breath in. And on the out breath, just relax your forehead, your cheeks, your tongue, your jaw. And another deep breath in through the nose. And as you slowly let the air out, just relax your shoulders and your arms and your thighs. And just kind of be there in the moment. Okay, so you can open up your eyes, Melanie. You still with me?
I'm still here.
Okay, so I think it's kind of fun to change the energy a little bit when we talk about new mommyhood and breastfeeding. So I would like for you to start off by telling me, if you remember, what, if anything, you did to prepare for breastfeeding your first baby. Was it classes, books, videos? Did you attend any La Leche League meetings, hang out with any other breastfeeding mothers?
Well, I was the first of my friends to have a child. So I did not have any resources as far as that goes, but I did take a birthing class. My first child was born at home, so it was specific to home birth. So breastfeeding was a natural extension of that whole process. My mom nursed me, and I saw all of my siblings nursed, so I kind of had that experience of watching that happen and, having the exposure rather than exposure to bottle feeding. And I think I read just about every book published about natural childbirth and, I guess, quote unquote, raising your child naturally, whatever that means nowadays. I became an Ina May Gaskin fiend. She does talk a lot about breastfeeding in her books.
You became a birth junkie.
Yes, I did.
So tell me a little bit about how you decided on a home birth.
Probably about halfway through my pregnancy, I had seen a documentary called The Business of Being Born. It was produced by Ricky Lake, and it was about birth practices in the United States and how they differ from what other countries are doing, how they manage the whole birth process and how they look at it. And I remember thinking, I do not want to have a baby in a hospital. The possibility that I could end up being induced or having a C-section, and I understand the reason behind it in a hospital. There's a lot of liability issues at stake. People can lose their licenses. They want to do everything they can to control the birth process as much as possible. And I said, you know what, to my husband, I really want to look into getting a midwife and doing a home birth. And he was very supportive, and we found a team of midwives who were willing to work with us. And that was kind of it from there.
So when you say that you brought it up to your husband, did you kind of slowly infiltrate information to him, or did one day you have this epiphany and say, I don't want to do a hospital birth, I want to have a midwife, and I want to start looking?
He's watched the documentary with me. So as soon as it was over, I think I looked at him and said, this is what we're doing. And he kind of put up his hands and said, okay, whatever you want.
That's great. So then did you have to shop around to find the midwives for you?
We did. And we had met with a couple of people, and it's the same as the process of looking for a doctor, is really finding somebody that you connect with and you feel confident in their abilities and their passion for what they do.
So tell me about the breastfeeding with your first baby. So you probably had the best of everything, with a mom who breastfed, growing up seeing breastfeeding going on, huge support system, and now you're giving birth at home with midwives. So tell me about the very early days of breastfeeding, and did you just kind of flow right into it and you were a really tired, exhausted mom, but it was going well? Did you have any particular struggles?
You would think, like you said, despite having all of this set up for me, I think the easiest way to describe it was that it was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Uh-oh.
So I had I think my initial reaction, when they handed my son to me and helped me put him on my breast, my immediate thought was, there is somebody's mouth on my nipple right now, and it's kind of weird. Because we're taught, despite, breastfeeding being natural, this is what breasts are made for. We're taught in this culture, breasts are sexual things. They're meant to be hidden. You should not show them to anyone. So you're ingrained with this, this culture your entire life. And then suddenly you have to turn around and turn it around and say, okay, breasts are for feeding babies, and this is all natural and okay, and I should feel comfortable with it. So that was probably my initial worry and something that I just needed in my head to get over. It was not pretty the first few days, I have to say. I guess there's no way to avoid getting too graphic, but there was scabs and blood involved. There was a lot of crying from both me and my son. It was tough, and nobody told me that it wasn't something that was just going to click naturally for everyone. And I think that was really scary to me.
Tell me what role your midwives or their assistants played in usually that first day. Every midwifery practice is somewhat different, and depending upon how your birth goes. But typically they kind of hang out for like 6 to 8 hours or so after the baby's born. If you're an experienced mom, they may not hang out as long if you don't need them to. But how were they with helping you with those first few latches?
I don't think initially the problem was with the latches. He latched on pretty easily the first time, and, we were checking the lips and all of these things that I had been taught in my classes, make sure that their lips are here and position their nose here and hold them like this. I feel like I had that down pat, and we didn't realize until a few days later that my son was pretty severely tongue-tied. And at that point, typically a lot of midwives will cut the frenulum as needed. If they are tongue-tied, it's that little flap of skin that's under your tongue. Sometimes it comes forward really close to the tip of your tongue. My husband actually has a pretty bad tongue tie. So we realized that there was the genetic connection to that. But my midwives at this point, it had been like 4 days, and they didn't feel comfortable doing it themselves, so they sent me to a specialist who performed the procedure in her office. And after that, things got a lot better.
So you started off in a really hard way. You were more than likely, like you said, had a good latch. You were doing all the things you needed to do. But yes, when a baby is tongue-tied, that little flap of skin, that little frenulum under the tongue, it makes it difficult for some babies to bring their tongue forward enough underneath the breast tissue and elevate their tongue to really milk you the way that they should. And instead, they're pretty much hanging out with their tongue, kind of biting. The tongue is held a little more in, and they're basically gumming you.
Yeah, not too comfortable.
Not too comfortable. And then with those, we can get graphic here with those pretty delicate nipple tissue. We're not meant to be battered in such a way from hundreds of rounds of the baby gumming you. So the skin will typically break if it goes on, and then it opens up and you get that crack, and then that's where you get the bleeding you experience.
Yes, and that coupled with the fact that I have something called Raynaud syndrome. When I go out in the cold, the tips of my fingers go numb. I actually didn't realize until we had seen a lactation consultant, because I was still having pain, even though I didn't have the scabs or the blood anymore. I knew it wasn't right, and we saw a lactation consultant, and when she saw me, she said, you know, the reason your nipples are bright red right now and turn purple and turn white, she explained to me this syndrome. I had my son in the middle of January, and our apartment wasn't really the warmest. So once we figured out that that was also part of the problem, I was able to make sure that I was bundled up while nursing so that I didn't experience the redness and the tingling and the soreness that accompanies Raynaud syndrome.
It's so interesting that you say that. And when I teach breastfeeding classes, I do talk to parents about, I actually tell them that it's definitely not supposed to hurt, but sometimes it does. And if it does, it means that something's not quite right. And I prepare them for things perhaps not going quite right. Even when you have the best of latch, there could be other unknown factors going on. So like you said, we're looking, we're peering, we're making sure the lips are flanged, you're checking out everything. And now you know for darn sure the latch is good, but you're still suffering. And so you figured out your baby had a tongue tie, which was excellent. And then you were sent to a specialist that took care of that. And you got through that hurdle. And yet it's still hurting you. And this is where the unknown factor comes in, where moms are just sitting home, just assuming, well, I guess this is my lot in life and it's still just going to hurt to this degree because now I know the latch is good and we fixed the tie, but I still want moms to know, like it sounds like what you did. You're saying, okay, we've made huge progress, but there's still something not right because it just shouldn't feel this way. And then you met with the lactation consultant who it's obvious that they saw like that tri-phase coloring, those changes in your nipple tissue, and brought that up. And that probably made a lot of sense to you because then you got to talk about how you have that in your usual life.
Yes. I think most people at that point probably would have said, you know what, this is it. I'm done. I've done my recommended 6 weeks of nursing, but that wasn't enough for me. And while I had the support of my husband, when I would cry at 2 a.m. because the baby wanted to eat again and I felt like I'd just put him down, he would wave the little can of formula that we got in the mail as a sample at me and said, we could always do this. And I was determined I was not going to do formula. I was going to commit to doing this. You know, I just felt that I just had to get through this tough part. And after that, I was going to really appreciate the beauty of breastfeeding. But it was a little ugly for a while.
Yeah, I have a feeling that your background and the family that you grew up in, the breastfeeding that was going on and the support had a lot to do with that. When some moms totally come from a formula feeding family and they don't really have that, I need to get through this part because I do know that, and I have witnessed the beauty of breastfeeding, the comfort of breastfeeding, all the benefits of breastfeeding. I've been around that so they can have that to draw on. But for some mothers, when their whole short breastfeeding life, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, is all pain, it's really hard for some to continue under those circumstances.
Yeah, I would never fault anybody for deciding that they had had enough. Absolutely. My background was that my mother wouldn't even give me a bottle for my baby dolls when I was little. If I said to her, Mommy, the baby is hungry, she would say, oh, just nurse the baby.
Oh, how cute.
I remember thinking at the time, Mom, that's weird because, again, we're told not to expose your breasts to anyone. And even though it was okay to watch my mom doing this for my siblings, I felt that it was weird to do to my baby dolls.
I kind of did the same thing with my kids, though. They didn't have little bottles for their babies, and I have a couple of pictures of them, much to their dismay, of them, pretending to breastfeed their baby dolls.
That's terrific.
Do you remember about how old your son was when you went to the lactation consultant and found out that it was the Raynaud's that was causing you the pain?
He was probably about 3 or 4 weeks old. I think I suffered a little longer than I needed to, only because I thought that it was residual pain from the scabs and everything like that. So I kind of toughed it out for a couple of weeks there before saying to the midwives, look, this is still hurting. What can you recommend? And that's when they had introduced me to a lactation consultant.
Now, did you do what you mentioned, some self-help tips at home, or did you wind up taking any medication, or are you taking medication for the Raynaud's that you currently have?
No, I never took any medication. I was trying to be very sparing with the ibuprofen, even after birth, even though the midwife said it was okay. I know that things are expressed in breast milk, and I just wanted to be very, very careful about what I was putting in my body.
Tell me if you can recall just one time with your first baby, and I know your husband was kind of teasing with the formula and you were crying, but is there one point where you really just felt like I really am done and I am not going to continue breastfeeding the baby?
Every night at about 3 or 4 in the morning.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah. I think that after 2 months, it started, because the weather started warming up, it started getting easier. But like I said, I was committed. I was prepared to be a martyr to breastfeed my son.
The stubbornness can work in our favor sometimes.
Absolutely. I ended up nursing him until he was 18 months old.
Fabulous. So it sounds like by the time the weather got warmer, here you are, a breastfeeding mom, you know what you're doing as far as that, and the pain is down a whole bunch, and so now you're getting to the point of enjoying breastfeeding. Yes, I did. And the convenience of it all, right?
Absolutely. I went back to work the day he turned 2 months old. So I would pump at work, but at night, coming home and having my husband hand him over to me, and he was so excited. As a baby, he must have smelled me coming. That was a really great feeling to have him so excited. Mom is here. The breastraurant is open.
That's right. My mother used to say the refrigerator is open for business. So tell me a little bit about your second babe. It sounds like you were, I'm making an assumption that you were probably on high alert. You already knew you had the Raynaud's, and your husband was tongue-tied. You had one son who was tongue-tied. So you were probably on high alert for that.
Yes, but here I thought maybe because I had so much knowledge, so many tips. At that point, I had started attending a La Leche League group. So I had all of this information at my disposal, thinking, okay, it's going to be smoother this time. But I had the same issues that I had the first time. A lot of initial scabbing and blood and pain. And because the weather was warmer, we were able to rule out that it was a result of the Raynaud's. But my second son also was tongue-tied, not as badly as my first son was. So again, this time our midwife had cut his frenulum a little bit, and that made a world of difference.
So you probably got to the happier place much sooner.
Absolutely.
Than you had with your first.
Yes, definitely.
And how far apart are your kids?
They are 2 years and 4 months apart.
So am I. You must have said to yourself that was such a relief, because when I'm working with mothers, as hard as things are with their first baby, if they persevere, they work with it, it's their focus, they often feel when they have their second baby, if they're having some difficulty, it's almost as if they can bear it even less than they could the first time, because now they have their, in your case, 2 years old, 4-month-old baby, toddler, what I call running amok around the house, while you're sitting there trying to focus on breastfeeding, recovering from the birth. So sometimes even the want is still there, and the stubbornness and the tenacity is still there. But having another little child around the house just compounds the issues.
I have to say our older son is very quiet, mild-mannered. I think he spent a lot of time sitting next to me, glowering at his brother. He used to tell me, when is that baby going back? When are you going to put that baby down? So he kind of sat around and watched while I was nursing most of the time.
Well, that was very helpful. That was not my world. My world was a toddler, like, trying to climb on board. I'm sitting on a couch, climbing around the couch, around my shoulders to the other side, asking for me to play, to read a book, to have a snack, all that fun stuff. So it can make it more challenging.
I don't envy you.
And how long did you breastfeed your second for?
Until he was 17 months old.
Excellent. So did both of them self-wean, or did you kind of push that along?
I kind of pushed it along. You know, it got to the point where, well, with my first son, I had gotten pregnant right around the time that he was starting to wean, and it was getting very physically uncomfortable for me. I know that has a lot to do with hormones, so it kind of cut him off at that point. He had really only been nursing then when he was sick or when he was feeling sleepy and wanted to be cuddled. So it was relatively easy.
And when you say physically uncomfortable, was it having a baby on your stomach uncomfortable? Was it nipples, very sensitive uncomfortable?
Yes, it was very sensitive nipples.
Taking a little break so I can share this info with you. I am really psyched to be able to share this next piece of news with you. My regular listeners are very familiar at this point with Momentum, the organization that I talk about on each show. You know, the one that I say saved my life as a new mother, the organization that helped me find other mothers who were new at this whole mothering thing. They became my people. They helped me navigate that first year of motherhood and continue to mother me as I had more kids and my need for support through their toddler years and kindergarten years and elementary school years just kept being needed. I made lifelong friends, and they were so helpful that I am doing all I can to continue to support the organization. I want Momentum to continue to thrive, and I want you, my All About Breastfeeding audience, to experience just some of what Momentum is all about. The ladies of Momentum have agreed to give my listeners a 14-day trial membership so you can see what this Mother Center thing is all about at no cost to you. Just hop on over to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/podcast. You will see a link from Momentum. It's in blue, and you just click it on and it will bring you to the page for you to sign up for your free trial. Honestly and truly, there's absolutely no cost to you. This is just a great opportunity for you to enjoy the discussion groups and the blogs and webinars and educational pieces that are available for free for you. I will have a link to this in the show notes. And now, back to the show. Is there anything else that you wanted to add or share with us about the early days of breastfeeding you first that you feel like you would love for another mother to know?
You know, I was so discouraged with my first experience, and my husband had said to me, why don't you find a La Leche League group? And I felt at that point, being a brand new mom, it was so hard for me to get out of the house. It was hard for me to brush my teeth at that point. The thought of getting out of the house and going to a meeting at night, it just seemed like too much. But with my second child, having already had found that group and been attending, it really made a world of difference to be able to hear this from other people. I got a lot of resources from the library the first time around, but it's very different from hearing from somebody in person. I had that problem too, and this is what I did, and this is how I dealt with it. It was so worth finding a group of women, you know, who are going through the same things as me, and to be able to get that resource in person.
Yeah, because they're telling you their story, and you're like, yes, me too, me too.
Absolutely.
It always makes us feel better to have that person-to-person contact, being able to look at someone, watch their expressions. When they're talking about the difficulties, you could almost feel their pain.
Yes.
So I do think it's valuable. I think the hardest part is exactly what you said, that it's just hard thinking about getting out of the house. You can't even brush your teeth, let alone put on a decent pair of pants and shirts and get out of your house and get somewhere on time, right? But you did explain the benefits of kind of pushing yourself to try to do that, because it's can really, really be helpful. It could turn the tide for a mom. It could be the difference between her continuing or not, just getting that other peer support.
Sure.
If you could go back and put your arms around your newly postpartum self and whisper one thing in your ear, what words of wisdom would you tell yourself?
Probably sleep when the baby sleeps, because so much of my crying and frustration had to do with the fact that I was exhausted because I was trying to get things done while the baby was asleep rather than resting my body. I feel like I would have healed faster. I would have had more stamina, to deal with the pain and frustration when it was happening if I were more well rested.
What do you think would make the difference too? It's because we tell that to mothers all the time, and yet frequently they find it so hard to do. What do you think anybody could have said to you to make a difference that you would have listened to that advice?
Please let me make you dinner, or please let me fold your laundry. Because those were the things I felt a lot of pressure to do, was to keep the house in order, to make sure that everybody was well fed. But really, I should have just handed over the reins to somebody else.
Exactly. I think those are wonderful words of wisdom. And to any of my All About Breastfeeding listeners that are listening to this and you are shortly about to give birth, I hope that you take those words to heart and help find people to help make you dinner. Hire a house cleaner for a couple of weeks. Ask people to help. There's a lot of people coming over most of our homes after we had a baby, and while we don't want to ask them for help, they really are there ready, willing, and able. So I have a little funny saying is that people should use and abuse the loved ones in their life for those first 4 to 6 weeks, because pretty soon everybody's going to go back to their lives, their homes, their jobs, and you're not going to have that kind of help anymore.
That's great advice. The tariff for being able to hold the baby is to do a chore around the house.
Exactly. I like that too. I think I'll use that. Do you have any funny stories about breastfeeding that you wanted to share with us?
Oh, I have lots of funny stories, especially as it pertains to pumping at work.
Oh, do tell.
I was fortunate enough to have my own office with a locking door when I was working full time. And I remember writing a letter to my boss before I went out on leave saying, I will be pumping and I'm just going to need to take X number of breaks per day to do this, and I'll be available via email if you need me during those times. So here I'm getting comfortable, and every Tuesday we had a guy who would come around and water all of the plants in our offices. And I would lock my door right around the time when I was going to pump and get myself comfortable. And sometimes I would have to take my entire shirt off because it wasn't conducive to pumping. And I'd be sitting in my chair and I would hear, the people on the other side of my office greeting the guy and saying hello. And I would feel the jiggle on my doorknob, but it was locked, and he would go away. And about 10 minutes later, all of a sudden I heard a key in the door, and all of a sudden my door flies open, and the plant guy, as we affectionately called him, and our office manager were standing in my doorway as I dove under my desk because I had no shirt on. Needless to say, after that, I had a sign on my door saying, "Do not disturb." They got an eyeful. They were very embarrassed, as was I. That day, I literally cried over spilled milk because...
Oh, yeah. What happened when you dove under the desk?
Well, of course, I lost suction. Everything fell all over the floor under my desk. I was sopping up milk with paper towels and praying that it wasn't going to smell. But it was very embarrassing, and here I thought I was immune to all of these horror stories that I'd heard about being walked in on while you were pumping.
I'm like laughing here, and as you're telling the story and I'm hearing that key jiggle, I'm like, just all kinds of emotions are going through. Laughing at the same time, like, oh my goodness, she's going to freak out. What's she going to do?
Nothing to stop that milk flowing like the sound of a key in the door.
And that's funny. You can kind of get used to, like, probably initially you may have been a little bit nervous, or, just you were hoping that the door's locked and nothing's going to happen. And even if it was locked and you're just still a little nervous, then there comes a point where you're doing that day after day after day. You then have a happy level of comfortability. And when you hear that door jiggle, there's no part of you that's a little nervous, or no little butterfly in your stomach or anything probably at that point. So I could just picture you sitting there really relaxed, expecting them to go away. Yes, exactly.
The only other time I was probably nervous is when I would hear a knock on the door, because I don't know how, we're still not figuring this out, but breast pumps are so loud. And I knew everybody in the hallway could hear it. My office mate on the other side of the wall would joke, because she could hear that rant, rant, rant. Like, we can't put a muffler on these things.
And you do that voice so well.
But it was good, because I think that as a result, a lot of women in my department had started getting pregnant right after I had given birth to my first child. And a lot of them ended up pumping because it became this normal thing. We would joke about the sound of the pump, or, walking with your little brown paper bag to the refrigerator, to store all the expressed milk during the day. It became normalized, and a lot of people ended up doing it in my department.
So you were like you were in your family, that first child paving the way.
Yes.
And here you are paving the way for all the other pumping moms in your office.
The pioneer.
The pioneer. So how long do you think you were the talk of your office about that incident?
Oh, I don't even want to think about it.
Long after you're gone, there's probably someone there going to be telling that story.
Between that and walking around with wearing like breast pads, because they're lumpy. You cannot wear anything form-fitting with a breast pad in your bra. It looks like you're just wearing a giant lumpy pasty under your clothes. I'm sure there are lots of whispered comments about those as well.
The funniest thing is, and I think that they're the cutest thing, there's a lot of nursing pads out there that are in different shapes, and my favorite is like the heart shape. So some of these you can still see through the shirt. Other than this just lumpy piece of something, you see this heart-shaped piece of something.
That is great. That is great. I wish I had found those on Etsy when I was looking.
They're kind of fun. I would love for you to have an opportunity to share a little bit about Momentum and your role that you play there.
Yeah, so I belong to the Mother Center of Southwest Nassau, which is a program of Momentum. I don't know how to describe it without it sounding like a cult, but it's really a great group of women in the community who are open-minded and non-judgmental. And we get together on a weekly basis to talk about everything that comes up, in your life as a mom, the good, the bad, the ugly. We talk about things ranging from sleep issues with your toddler to getting into middle school and dealing with mean girls. The topics run the gamut from pre-birth all the way through, being part of the sandwich generation and caring for your parents and children simultaneously. I started out attending the groups. I was looking for something to do and a way to connect with moms and not feel judged for the way that I was parenting, because everybody has something different that works for them. And it was a great practice for me to learn to be more non-judgmental. And after attending for about a year and a half, I became trained as a peer facilitator. So being able to lead these conversations, was such a great thing to be able to receive from the group and then to give back as a facilitator.
So when you said before that the group topics run the gamut, are you talking within each particular group about all those things, or you take a group that for X amount of weeks you have a specific topic that you're talking about broadly?
We have a couple of different formats. They offer 4, 6, and 8 week groups where you're talking about a specific topic, and it's something that will be very generalized. For example, women's sexuality, and that could cover anything from kind of PG all the way to X-rated. We have 1-day groups where we talk about whatever the topic of interest is. It could be somebody saying, oh, breakfast was a nightmare this morning. Nobody wanted to eat what I'd made, and talking about, we end up talking about feeding habits and ways to make mealtime more fun or getting the kids to cooperate. So there's pretty broad spectrum of topics and formats that we use.
Take me back to your very first group, if you remember.
Okay.
What I want to know is how you found out about Momentum, and the very first group you took, what the topic was, how old your child was, and what I really want you to talk about is the emotional feelings you had being part of this mother's group.
I think that I found out about the group. I'd heard about it maybe a year before my second son was born. And I remember thinking at the time, this sounds like a parenting class. I don't need a parenting class. I'm doing just fine, even though in actuality I wasn't. And when I'd heard about it again, somebody had personally invited me to attend. And I said, sure, you know what? She's going to be there. It's somebody that I know and I'll feel comfortable. I ended up going, and I couldn't even tell you what the topic was. I had such a great facilitator. She could have read the phone book and I would have felt comfortable and at home in that environment. I ended up coming very regularly on a weekly basis. It was such a safe place for me to talk about my parenting experience. It was not a lecture. The feeling that I left with was, wow, I've found my people. And it's not necessarily that we all had a lot of things in common or we're all raising our children the same way, but it was just that everybody was willing to be warm and open. You don't have to be a crunchy, hippie kind of person to open your mind to different possibilities and different ways of parenting, and open your heart to these women who may have struggled like you have in different aspects of motherhood, and being able to feel that kinship and camaraderie of, hey, we're all in this together. We're doing what we can to get through it day by day.
One of the things that I really got from my first group is the whole art and science of being non-judgmental. It took me a little while to really figure that out, because I would say that I learned better to be non-judgmental as far as my body language and what I said verbally. But I have to admit, there was still stuff going on in my head. I was like, really? That's kind of crazy. So it was like stepping stones for me. And then what I came to realize after a short period is that I love the safe environment, the facilitator making you feel comfortable. You really started to trust each other, that what you were going to talk about there, they weren't going to take outside. There was not going to be any mean girls or bullies or gossiping. You get that comfort level, and that's when the beauty really begins to happen, because you start to speak about things that are truly on your mind from deep, not just surface stuff. And then you really get the whole non-judgmental aspect of it. And that really helped me, because I really realized I don't want other mothers who are just like myself and parenting just like myself. I don't want to change anybody's differences. I want to learn about the differences and try and understand it. And I also began to understand that I don't necessarily have to like it. It doesn't have to be something that I'm going to do, but I have a lot to learn from other people and accept that, that this is what they're doing and it works for them, and that's okay. So that was a huge learning process for me.
Yes, it does take a lot to get there, but I have to say it's been probably my biggest area of growth since becoming a mother. Even as far as breastfeeding goes, I remember thinking before my first son was born, I would never give my child formula. Breastfeeding is the only way to go. And then joining these discussion groups and hearing, maybe somebody chose not to breastfeed because they were sexually assaulted and had issues with their body, or maybe another mom had a breast reduction and lost a lot of her ability to produce milk. For me, it was hearing people's stories about how they came to their decision to parent in any way, whether it was breastfeeding or co-sleeping, whatever the case may be. Really being exposed to other stories, and other experiences helped me to be more accepting and less judgmental.
Yeah, and the defenses go down, and I find that that's how I learn the best, because if I'm so busy thinking that what I'm doing is the right way, the only way, the right way, then it doesn't open me up to listen to what other people are doing in certain, let's just say even potty training. There's a lot to learn from other people, and you can say, you know what, I definitely wouldn't do that. I can't see that working for me. I'm not comfortable with that, but I could see that it's working for you. But for me to be open-minded enough, now I'm at the place where I can let some of the other stuff filter in and say, you know what, that sounds reasonable. I think I'll try that. And when you're in a group that the environment and that just feeling very safe, there's huge growth there. So I imagine that first group was just this huge eye-opener. You got turned on to Mother Center. You took quite a few groups yourself, and then were trained to become a facilitator, as I did, and then you feel really good about giving back. And if you felt anything like I did, I certainly felt like I was definitely giving back, but overall, I was still getting a lot more than I felt like I ever gave.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right. Well, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about if you have any contact info that you'd like, if people want to contact you by email or Facebook, if you are comfortable with that, if anything that you said during this show resonated with someone and they wanted to ask you something, even about Momentum. All my listeners know I have a free trial going on that Momentum has offered, and they're going to hear that at the end of the show. But if they have a question that they personally want to ask you about your experience, are you comfortable with them doing that?
Of course, because I am attached to my office phone when I am not wiping butts and making sandwiches. I think the number to reach me on is 516-593-2042. I'm happy to answer questions about breastfeeding or Momentum's programs, or even how to spruce up your resume if you're going back to work.
Hey, that would be great. Thank you so much, Melanie, for spending your kids' nap time, which is, gosh, I'm really impressed to hear that, because that is this precious time of our day that we can either do nothing, something of fun, or something of importance, and you gave that up to chat with us, so I really, really am grateful and appreciate that.
Oh, I'm all about giving back in recognition of the people who took time to shepherd me through my first years as a stay-at-home mom.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori.
What a great show that was with Melanie. I so much appreciate her taking the time to hang out with me today. Wanted to let you know that the next show coming up will be part 3 of the 5-part series. And this one, I hope you're really going to enjoy. We're going to talk about babies and bottles and daycare. What you need to know for a smooth transition. Until then, bye-bye.